Thank you for coming in this afternoon. This is our Women in Science panel. And if no one has told you already, our STEM Central event today is sponsored by a couple of groups of really great people. One is the Yahoo Employee Foundation and the City of Santa Clara. A&D did some sponsorship with us today, and the Foundation and Friends of the Santa Clara City Library. So we'd like to thank them for all of their attention to these awesome programs. We're very excited. I'm super excited. I lead the Girls Who Code program here at the library, and I'm super excited to have these ladies with us today and introduce them very quickly, and then we'll get started with our questions. We have Dr. Laura Peticolas. There she is. She's the director of Multiverse education team at UC Berkeley's Space Sciences Laboratory. If that doesn't sound cool, leave the room. Just kidding. Okay, we have Scylla Killicoat, and she is a staff scientist and leader of Gizmo. Quiz. Who knows what Gizmo is? No one. That's okay. I didn't either, so I wrote it down. It's called Grid Integration Systems and Mobility Research at SLAC National Accelerator Laboratory. Does anybody know where that is? Near Stanford. Very good. And we have Ali Guarneros Luna, and she is currently at the ESD Control Program Manager at Ames Research Center. Has anybody have been up to the Ames Research Center? I went there yesterday. It was really awesome. And ESD is electrostatic discharge, in case you didn't know. And Miriam Labib, raise your hand, Miriam. I love Miriam. She's a former library kid, and now she's a big software engineer. I'm so excited that she's here because I've known her since she was this big. It's so adorable. I love it. She's a software engineer at Pivotal Software, and we're going to all talk about what they do, and I will have some questions. But first, I would like each of them to go through and describe exactly to us what you do at your job, because you can have names and titles and things, but nobody really knows exactly what you do. So we'll just go down the line. Let's start with you, Scylla. Guess what? You're on.
I think it's on. Well, first of all, thank you for having me today here, Erin. I really appreciate your patience with my schedule.
No problem.
And thank you to all the funders who have invited us here. I run the Gizmo group at SLAC. It's a fairly new group that I built about 2 years ago. Our group was one person in a trailer just about 2 years ago. Right now we're about 6 scientists, 3 engineers, and about 10 Stanford University students, graduate students, mostly postdocs and graduate students. We have a good mix of people in terms of women and to men, because I always like to hire women. And it's 50-50, and I'd like to keep that as much as I can. And our research is really about clean energy adoption. So all of us are working really hard to look at technology, policy, and market around clean energy adoption.
Great. Thank you. Miriam, what do you do?
Hello. My name is Miriam. I'm a software engineer at a startup in San Francisco. I write code primarily in Ruby. I used to, at my previous jobs, write code in Python, in Java, in C. So depending on where you're working, you're going to write in different programming languages. We currently work to offer our customers an opportunity to be able to launch a lot of applications, and we can guarantee that they're going to keep working. So say, for example, for simplicity, say for some reason you wanted 100 websites. You wanted each of your friends to get a website, and all of them are able to visit this website anytime they want. You want to make sure that that website is always up. And no matter what happens, they can always hit that website. So we write software to make sure that we can manage large numbers of websites, and that if any of them goes down or crash, we'll immediately start it up again, and we'll make sure that it keeps working. And we'll give you a lot of information about why it failed, and we can help developers understand why things went wrong and how to make sure nothing goes wrong in the future. So that's mostly what the code that we write is. and I also write the billing code that charges customers for our service, because that's important when you're trying to make money.
Laura, please tell us what you do.
Hi. So I work at the Space Sciences Laboratory at the University of California, Berkeley, and I run a group. There are about 6 of us in this group, and we're really responsible for the education of the lab, as well as this big project called the Mega Movie, the Eclipse Mega Movie. So how many of you know that in August 21st, there's a big total solar eclipse? Okay, a few of you, now you all know. So you'll see about 90% of the sun will be covered by the moon here in San Francisco. And then if you're up further north, then there's a total solar eclipse, which means the moon will cover the sun completely. And at the Space Sciences Lab, we study the sun, and we're really interested in the magnetism and the plasma dynamics of the sun. And so we're excited about this opportunity to have people take photographs, set up cameras before the total solar eclipse, and then give us or provide the images for research. And we're working with Google on that. So that's a lot of what I do these days, is to manage that project and read papers about various things, like how dark the sky gets with different as the moon crosses over the sun, so that we can accurately represent it on a little simulator on our website. So and then I have a lot of meetings. I do a lot of meetings, and right now I'm doing a lot of touring across the country to tell people about the eclipse, because it's really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And if you don't have plans to go north and be under this path of totality, it's something for you to think about, because it's supposed to be a real life-changing experience. So I'll put a little pitch in for that.
Good. Allie.
Okay. Well, I actually I work for NASA Ames. I'm an aerospace and systems engineer. I build a lot of technology that we send to the space station to develop and mature a state-of-the-art technology that we want to use for Mars exploration, or farther, go to explore different planets in our galaxies. I have worked in the Orion mission on the thermal protection systems. Also, I work in the ESD. I'm actually the program manager for the ESD control at NASA Ames. I'm a technical authority in few things like batteries. When we build things that they need to have batteries and they need to go to the space station, there's a lot of things that we have to worry about, because if something goes wrong, we can actually hurt the astronauts. And so I oversee a lot of that stuff. I also hardware that goes inside the space station, and it goes inside and comes out. So a lot of the satellites, small satellites that are called CubeSats, I'm an expert on developing and certify them to go inside the space station and get deployed. So, and I work with a lot of group of people, very diverse. Most of them are men. Usually I'm the only woman at the room that I'm technical, and I'm a technical authority. So it's sometimes it can be difficult, but I love my job, and it's a great experience working for NASA.
Cool. Who else wants to work at NASA? Be pretty neat, huh? Just let me marry him. So did you all see yourselves on this path towards what you do now, or what did you want to be when you were a kid? And you're like, I'm a kid. What do I want to do when I grow up? How about Allie? We'll start with you.
I'm actually from Mexico. I was born and raised in Mexico. So when I was about 7, 8 years old, my mother had encyclopedias, a lot of encyclopedias. So I used to come from school and read them. And one of the things that impacted me was the space shuttle. They were building it, and they were talking about the person that built it, and I just was inspired. So at 7 years old, I was already saying that I was an aerospace engineer, and that's what I wanted to be. Obviously, I didn't know exactly what it meant, but I was so in love with the hardware that they built and the things that they could actually possibly do, right? So as I was growing up, that was my declared major. When I came to the United States, it's a different story. As an immigrant child, it was really hard for me to pursue the career. I didn't even know if I was going to get actually going to school. So if I can tell my story.
Yeah.
Okay, so I came, when I came from Mexico, there was an earthquake that happened that most of my peers of my age actually died in the earthquake because they went inside the school when the earthquake happened. So the kids and the teachers were trapped, so most of them died. There were few of them that they didn't die. I was lucky enough that the school that I was going, the person that opened the keys to the school didn't open it on time, so we were not inside. So coming from that background, moving here, it was very traumatic. I had to learn the language, I had to learn the culture, adjust myself. And so I went to school here, and then when I graduated from high school, I really didn't know if I was gonna be an engineer, if I was gonna have that opportunity to go to school. So there was also a sentiment in California about immigration. So being myself an immigrant, I didn't feel that I was welcome at that time. So luckily I had friends and family that support me, and I was able to go to college. And I went to college for like about 2 years, but if you can imagine yourself, I was the sole support for my mother and my brothers because I was the oldest one and I had to work full time. So going to school and working full time was really hard, so I ended up dropping school, and it took me 10 years, but I went back, because I was determined to get a degree. It didn't matter what kind of degree it was. I was just with the dream of getting a degree and working in the industry doing something. And so I ended up going to San Jose State, getting my bachelor's degree, and my professor there told me, Ali, there's an internship, why don't you go and apply? The internship was only for 3 months, and I decided to take it, and ever since I've been at NASA doing what I love. So basically, I didn't really thought that I was going to be an engineer, but it was the persistence and the opportunity that was presented at that time.
Awesome. How about you, Laura? What did you want to be when you were a kid?
Well, I'm told that in 4th grade, I told a friend of mine who's 10 years older than I am, who we were family friends, and she said that I told her I wanted to be an astrophysicist. I do know in 6th grade, I had a substitute teacher who came in from and brought all these amazing NASA resources. And my friend and I, who we were sitting next to each other, and we both said, we're going to be astronauts or astronomers. No, we were going to be astronomers. And, all our hands were always raised. And so then in 9th grade, I had a career development class. And so in those career development classes, you find out what you're good at. And I was like, oh my gosh, am I going to be good at astronomy? And I got my test results, and astronomer was actually there, listed as a possible job for me. So I was like, yes. And to get an A in that class, you had to interview 3 people. I was in Oregon, in Eugene, Oregon. 3 people who had the profession you wanted to have. So I went, which is an awesome thing to do in 9th grade. I highly recommend it. So I went and I interviewed with these 3 astronomers at the University of Oregon. And the first one said, this is great, we need more women in astronomy, but first you should study physics, because physics is the basis of astronomy. And I said, oh, okay, take note. And then the second person, I went into his office, and he was a visiting professor, so his office was very cold feeling. He didn't have many things in it. And he had a chair for me. He was sitting kind of like I am sitting now, and then he had a chair about, where you all are, for me to sit in, which was very intimidating, and I almost feel like he was even raised up higher. And he said, so you want to be an astronomer? And I said, well, now I've heard I really need to be a physicist first, so yeah, I'm going to be a physicist. And he just stopped and stared at me. And then he said, well, I think it's only fair to tell you that women can't do physics. And you can try, but I want you to know that it's just, women just aren't good at it. And I thought, well, luckily I had a lot of support in my family also, and I was just like, what's wrong with this guy? And I think actually it was kind of cool because I was like, I'm going to prove this guy wrong. So I was like, and then he's like, do you have any other questions? I was like, no, nothing for you. So then I went to the third professor, and I said, well, what do you do all day? He said, well, all I do is math. Do you like math? And I said, oh yeah, I love math. And he said, oh good, because that's all I do. So I was like, okay, great. So then things were kind of set from that point on, and I did the math I had to do and the physics, and physics was hard at first, but it was also super cool, and the math and physics all went together, and I don't know, I had a love affair with my math and physics. And then I went to the University of Oregon and got my physics degree and also a math degree, and loved that. And then I was the only woman who graduated that year in physics. And so I thought maybe there was something wrong with me. And I knew I could do it, but I was like, well, maybe as a woman I shouldn't do it. So I decided to go clean fish and ski instead. So I went and skied in Colorado. I was a ski bum, and I went to Alaska and cleaned fish. But I really missed the physics. But I loved Alaska, so I thought, I wonder if I could do physics in Alaska and get my PhD. And sure enough, they had a PhD program and to study the aurora borealis, which are these beautiful lights in the sky up in Alaska. And I had fallen in love with Alaska, and I already loved physics. And sure enough, I got accepted to that program and got my PhD up there. And then there were folks from California, UC Berkeley, who were doing launching rockets from the Poker Flats Research Range up in Alaska. And what was so nice about Alaska is it was kind of away from all like people would come up from Caltech or Stanford, and they'd be like, you guys actually talk to each other? Your grad students actually talk to you? Like, we're like, yeah, what's it like in your, oh no, we're all competitive. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. Anyway, so then Berkeley folks came up to launch a rocket, and I was just so excited about that and all the data for the Aurora, and they were excited about my excitement, and so then they hired me, and I have been there since 2000 and never left. So there's my path.
Very cool. I think the PhD in physics in Alaska is actually called physics. Librarians have the worst jokes, sorry. It's like, oh, physics. Miriam, besides growing up to be a children's librarian, what else did you want to do? I'm just kidding.
No, that's actually really true. Like, I remember when I was in your seats and I would come to events at the library, pretty sure I wanted a job that just let me go to the library all the time. I actually was one of those kids that never knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. I changed it every week. Every week I told a different story. Usually just if I read a book, I just got inspired and changed my whole life plan. I actually, by the time I got to high school, I had considered every single career, but I was absolutely certain that I never wanted to be an engineer. I was determined. I was like, I don't want to sit in front of a computer for 12 hours a day. That sounds really boring. I want to be exploring a forest or something. And I was determined that computer science, at that time in my head, it was building computers or like screwing in, like just basically screwing in nuts and bolts like all day, or answering phone calls and telling people to turn their computers on and off again. Like, I did not have a good idea of what computer science was. And this is sad. I think this is something I wish I'd been exposed to earlier, just like what code was. The first time I wrote a line of code was in college. So I went to college, I went to Berkeley, and I got accepted. I was really excited about that. And then they were like, so what do you want to study? And I was like, oh, I still don't know. And I kept thinking and thinking, and I must have got chosen like 4 different majors that first year. And then I decided I was really interested in thinking. So I decided to do a major in cognitive science. And cognitive science is a major where you study how the brain works, how human beings think, and how they process. And I was really interested in process and how we make decisions and how we make choices. But the first class I had to take for the major in order to get accepted was a computer science class. And I was really bummed out. I was like, this is great. I just can't escape this engineering thing. And I go take that introductory class, and I'm just planning, I'm like, it doesn't even matter. You don't have to get an A. Just like get into the major you want. And I'm so surprised. The class was not at all about fixing computers, or it didn't even talk about how computers worked that first class. It talked about how to make computers think. And I was like, wow, this is pretty similar to how human beings think. If we think about how we solve our own problems, once we know how we think, we can make a computer follow processes and follow a certain way to do math, to reach conclusions, to give us answers. And it completely changed the way I was thinking about computer science. And that class was so much fun. It was all just seeing, like, I was writing code that was making the computer think. And it was making the computer give me things I wanted. I made the computer draw things that were pretty that I could show to my friends, because that was the level I was at that point. And the computer was doing things better than me. I could make a computer do math faster than I could. Like, that was crazy. We could make computers do all the things that we can't do, and it can do it even better. But we're the smart ones. We're the ones who told the computer to do it. So that was my introduction to computer science. And I was so surprised when I was like, okay, I think I'm going to take another class and try this out. And I ended up majoring in both, because naturally I couldn't just pick one thing. But that was my introduction to engineering.
Yeah, so,
You have a question?
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, real quick.
Yeah, that's actually really good. So the question was, did you make Scratch? So Scratch was actually the programming language that Berkeley was using for that first class. And Scratch is a programming language where instead of writing code and typing, you move around blocks. And so you're able to you're able to visually, like, draw out your code. And that's really cool. I'm really glad that you were exposed to it and that you got to see Scratch.
Well, Stella, tell us what you wanted to do.
Yeah, so my path is two deflection points in my life. When I was in first grade, I came home one day and said, I'm not going back to school. I'm done with this. It was fun, but I really don't enjoy it. So my parents said, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to clean homes. And so they said, fine, you can stay home and clean homes. So to me, it was like a couple of months. To them, according to them, it was only a week, that I actually got up at 5 a.m. and cleaned the walls and windows and laundry and, ironing. And I thought it was the hardest job ever. It didn't look as easy as it seemed. And I said, okay, I'm ready to go back to school. By this time, I had missed a lot of, by the time we negotiated with my parents and I did all this, I missed a lot of school, so they couldn't get me back into first grade, so I had to wait for a second grade. And none of the schools wanted to get someone who couldn't read or write or even do a little bit of math into second grade. But luckily, my mother had a good friend who was an elementary school teacher, and she said, I'll work with her as much as we can. We'll just put her in my classroom. So she put me in her classroom way at the back with the kids who couldn't read and write. And I looked around and I'm like, I really don't want to be here. I want to be in the front of the class. I want to learn to read and I want to learn to write. And from that day on, I think my life really changed. She was really wonderful, helped me stay after school, helped me learn to read and write. So by the time I get to third grade, I think I was reading as well and writing and doing math as well as the kids in the front. So she moved me to the front of the class starting, I think, towards the middle of the third grade. So that was a big thing for me. And I said, hey, I can do this. School's not that bad. And the more you accomplish things, the more you feel good about yourself. So when I was about end of high school, I decided to go to the US and do undergrad here. And my parents are like, sorry, it's so expensive, we can't afford it. So you'll have to figure it out all your own. Because I grew up in Turkey. And there's no way that I could get any help from a public school. Learn about the schools, learn about the exams and schedules and things like that. So no internet, reminding you all of you, in 1980s. And so I had to do my own research and go to one library in Istanbul at the time and find this book that had all of its pages torn. Only about 3 pages of schools were there. One of them was University of New Hampshire. The other one was Clarkson. I looked at the little pictures and I said, okay, I'll apply these two. And then, anyway, I applied and I didn't get any financial aid, so I wrote them back immediately. Of course, this was the time when you mailed things. And I said, thank you very much for the financial aid you gave me, but I can't go on unless I have a full, and both of the schools actually gave me a full scholarship, which is really nice. I looked at New Hampshire's picture, I said, oh, I really like this tower clock, clock tower, and so I'll go there. That's what I did. And when I got there, they said, oh, we put you in undeclared engineering. I said, why? I want to be an industrial engineer. By the time, I was really good at being very, very efficient in things. Because if I'm efficient at school, I could actually do a lot of reading and writing and playing. So I was very, very good at being efficient, and that's what I wanted to do in my life. And they said, sorry, we closed that department about a couple of years back. Of course, the book that I had was from, I don't know, 1970s. So I said, okay, so I went to this panel of engineers, and they said, there were people, professors sitting in a panel like this, and one of them said, I'm from the electrical engineering department. If you're a woman, don't even bother, just like you. Because only about a couple of girls get into our class, and then none of them really graduate, you know. So don't worry, don't even bother. So of course the next day I went and signed up in the engineering department. We were 75 people, 5 of us were girls. Actually, 3 of us graduated that year. The other 2 actually graduated a year later. So we all graduated in the end. Then I went to Carnegie Mellon and got married. And when I was starting my PhD, I realized I was pregnant, so I had to stop and not do my PhD. But during the time that I was at Carnegie Mellon and doing my graduate work, doing my master's, I actually realized that I'm really curious, that I ask a lot of questions. And I'm really much more curious than the people around me. And that led me to explore some research while I was there. I started doing some research, and then I realized I'm pretty good at it. I really enjoy asking questions and figuring out how to answer those questions, and really trying to figure out what kind of resources are available and pursue some of the things that I want to do. So that was a great, because research is really great because you ask your own questions, you go get funding for your own, how you want to answer your own questions, and then you publish your results so everyone benefits. And that's what I've been doing for the last 15 years or so. First at Berkeley Lab in Berkeley. Then I realized while I was at Berkeley Lab, I was sort of getting stale. So I took a year off and went to Google and said, I really want to learn about new methods, new programming tools, retool myself. And I started working at the very bottom. While I was running a group at Berkeley Lab, I went to Google and just worked as a little software engineer, more learning than doing, actually. They were very patient with me. And then I moved on to Slack to, again, build my own group, but retooled myself so I could actually do better research and stuff.
For the more senior members, because Miriam's only 12. I'm just, I love you so much. Do you still find yourself being eager to learn more as you go along, or do you feel like you're kind of in a spot where you're comfortable? Do you like being comfortable where you are, or are you always trying to find challenges? And then Miriam, I'm sure this isn't, the only stop for you as a software engineer. Are there any goals that you want to move towards as you go along in your career? So, how about Ali? I'll start with you.
Okay, well, in the industry that I am, you never stop learning. Especially because we're trying to solve problems that they have never been tried, or things that no one has actually done. So you become really, it's like a less, you learn as fast as you can, you reach the maximum, and then you create whatever you need to do, and then suddenly you become the expert, right? So it happens to me that throughout my career, I have all those, sessions where, something needs to be done or solved, and then there's no one there, and you basically have, if you want to make it happen, you have to actually do it yourself and be like, okay, I'm going to do it. And then I go into this deep research, and learning experience, and testing, and then I created, take it to space to prove the concept, and then suddenly you turn around and who else has done this? No one else. And so you become like kind of the expert. So I constantly found myself doing this cycle of engineering, and it just never changes. And I'm used to now that that is kind of like this my cycle of my career. There's always something that needs to be done. No one has done it, and then there you go. I love it. I think it's has kept me constantly as a technical person on the age of new technology and state of the art, and also has helped NASA to be at the front of the technology that we're trying to develop. So it's good.
Yeah, thank you.
Laura.
Yeah, I think it's very similar for me. The nice thing about having kind of one of these higher degrees is that you're hired into positions where you're expected to kind of innovate and come up with the next thing that's going to happen. For example, this Eclipse mega movie project we started envisioning 5 years ago while we were doing other things, but thinking about, okay, what's the technology going to be in 5 years, and what kind of data can we get, and so we're always kind of thinking about what's the next step in terms of learning about the sun and space and Earth, what kind of technologies are coming out that we can use for those studies, what kind of new experiments can we do that nobody's done before. So, and then I think with the education and outreach piece, there's just such a nice, especially now with all the technology, so many citizens can participate in science in a meaningful way that helps scientists really learn more about our universe and our world and Earth and birds and ladybugs and the sun. And so the whole kind of citizen science world is really ballooning and creating this opportunity for all of us to contribute to science. And so I feel like I'm just constantly learning just by the nature of my job, which I absolutely love. I would be bored out of my mind if I had to do the same thing every day or every month. So, yeah.
Mary.
So I'll answer the question of, what are my goals for the future? One of the nicest things about life is that there's always something you haven't tried. And I know it's a really cliche answer, but it's always nice when you think about all the possibilities that are open to you and you don't restrict yourself to a certain I need to be here in 10 years, and you just see what makes you happy and what is fulfilling to you and go with what your heart tells you. When I graduated college, I was determined not to return to college. I felt like I'd done enough homework for a lifetime, and I really just wanted to make money. I wanted to try seeing how companies worked, and it's weird because this past couple months I've been really missing school, and I've been really missing learning, and I've been missing being challenged every day and being able to see myself, look back on my achievements and see that I counted for. So I think I'm probably going to end up in grad school in a year or two. It's also been really nice to see how companies work. So money making is interesting. Sometimes it gets in the way of learning about the things you care about, and sometimes it facilitates it. Money can be a really good motivator. So I've also thought about it would be cool if I could start a company at some point. I can see myself finding something that I'm really passionate about, and as long as you're not broke and you're not, trying to find money for food, then you can really give your all to this company, because it's giving you your lifestyle, your sustenance, and it's also giving you your passion and your fulfillment in life. So I think I ask myself every day what makes my life purposeful, and I try to just see where it goes.
So my answer is going to be very similar to yours. I think if you are doing research, you have to be ahead of the industry, and you have, especially in clean energy. So I have to be ahead of the existing technologies, and I have to be ahead of all the other factors that influence clean energy research. So I read a lot. I spend a lot of my time reading journal articles. I talk to a lot of people trying to understand research gaps in the areas, because I think my role, very distinct from industry and academia, is that I can take chances that no one can. Industry may be very cautious about losing money or resources. I don't. That's my job. I can take chances and they can't. Or academia may want to take their solution, take a problem, simplify it, and solve it, but I care about their applicability in the real world. So I need to take that solution and see how applicable it is. And even if I can't, then I need to change the solution a little bit and make sure that we can find a more applicable solution in the real world. So that requires that I'm on top of the technology, I'm on top of the math and physics every day. I continue to develop new, grow in areas where I can use new tools. Graduating from college, you'll use MATLAB a lot because that's what is fed to a lot of people. In the real world, it's so expensive that companies don't necessarily buy MATLAB for you to use, so you need to retool yourself and use Python and other things. So that there's that sort of retooling that happens all the time. And the more I grew in my career and become more of a manager and a leader, I realized that I had to carve that once a day time, or once a week time, 1 day a week time, to make sure that I continue to technically grow, because that's what is important to me.
Okay, thank you. We have to have one more quick question, and then we'll take a few questions from the audience, and then we have to get going. What advice would you give to parents with daughters who may or may not be interested in going into this career? And what advice would you give for girls that are really interested in STEM careers?
For the parents, I think one thing is that you shouldn't limit your girls and your boys to fit a certain norm that we have, the perception of the society, right? Because in my time life, I had a lot of students who they want to pursue engineering, but they're like, oh, my mother or my father don't, they don't think that it's a good, career. I need to be a doctor or a nurse, but I'm passionate about engineering, right? And so they have to really let go of their dreams and follow, what their family wants. And it's the same thing for the boys. I have a lot of students also that have the same issue. So I always try to tell the students and the parents that, you should let your child be whatever they want, because once they feel comfortable, they're going to be successful in whatever, they choose to do. And that is a key factor, because they're going to be happy. And if you want a child happy, as a parent, you want a child happy and successful. And for girls who want to pursue, engineering, it could be hard and intimidating. I can tell you that my experience at college and the university, usually I was the only girl or the only other girl in the room. But I had a really good experience, working with a lot of males and my peers, they were very supportive. So, even though it might be intimidated, just move forward, because there's nothing to lose but, try. If you don't try, you're never going to know what's going to happen. And so, one other thing that I want to say is that a lot of times life put things in front of you that, they're not counted for. So, you should always be persistent. Do not let the circumstances define your destiny, but you define your destiny, right? And so that would be my advice to everybody.
Good. How about Laura?
Yeah, I agree completely with both of those advices. Or not advice. I'm just trying to think if there's anything to add to it. I think this notion, even though it sounds like my path was fairly straight in many ways, I kind of envisioned being an astrophysicist, and I'm a space scientist technically now. If I call myself an astrophysicist, the astrophysicist would come and take me away. But for all intents and purposes, I made it to where I wanted to go. But it was, even though I had this kind of vision for myself and I accomplished it, it's amazing, life shows up, and all these things happen that you really do not expect to happen. And I think what's really helped me is to kind of go back to my heart that always had this connection to the universe and wanted to learn more about it. And that kept me going, even when I was cleaning fish. And then I was thinking about the stars while I was cleaning fish. And I still love to eat fish, luckily. But I think that for the girls in the room who might want to go into science and engineering, and or whatever you want to do, really, to just, you probably know deep in, or you don't know, but if you're following every day, I like what you were saying, like every day you kind of know whether you're in the right place or not, and to make those adjustments. And then I think as parents, just supporting your child. I have 2 children. I have 2 boys, and they're very different from each other. And it's been so awesome to do exactly that. To just, one of them is a maker he makes weapons out of everything. But and I'm not all into weapons or anything, but at the same
Future
time,
defense industry expert.
maybe he'll defend our country from a way of life that we don't want. So I don't know. In any case, I try to do that with my boys, and so yeah, I guess just to add. I have nothing to add except support your children.
So my parents are sitting in this room, so I have to be really careful about what I say. No, but in all seriousness, my parents were extremely supportive with my ups and downs and changing my major. Every day when I would change my major, my mom would be like, "That's great, yeah, you can do that. I can see you good at that." Even though she probably couldn't, and maybe she hadn't even heard what I said. But she was always really supportive, like, "Yeah, you can do it. Whatever you put your mind to, you can do it." And that's really, really important. My little sister is also here in the room, and Thursday was National Take Your Kids to Work Day. I don't actually have kids, but I do. I figured I could slip my sister in. And she came with me to work, and she was writing code for an application at work, and I was so happy to see her see what I do and be exposed to that. So I think for sure, if I'd been exposed to sort of more of the coding aspect of things and understanding that, like, that hardware software difference, and just also understanding like what the root of, like, what being a programmer really means, I think I would have loved to write code earlier and would have been, would have gone into college, probably gotten higher grades that first semester. But it's all good. What's important is exposure, because we can't choose something that we don't know about. And my advice for girls, I didn't really think that it would make too much of a difference if there were more guys in my class than girls. When I walked into my first, not so much my introductory class at Berkeley, it was pretty 50-50 actually. But as soon as I went into my second class after that, I was like, wait, where did all the girls go? I don't understand. I thought maybe I just went to the boys' class or something. I'm not really sure what happened. They just all dropped off. And at first I was like, well, no big deal. I can work with guys. I can work with girls. It doesn't really matter. But it matters. It really matters. When you feel supported by people, like, girls have different experiences than guys, just in life. And when you see people that are similar to you, you immediately feel like you belong, and you immediately feel like it's easier to bond over shared experiences. And the further you go in that, 3 years down that road, I was feeling pretty lonely. And it was really easy for guys to just form groups and like bond over whatever things. And things get said that are exclusive to girls. Guys have like conversations that aren't always, sensitive to the perception of girls. And I'm talking about college guys here, so like not all guys, just like the immature ones. I definitely went through a lot of experiences where people just kind of overlooked me or didn't really think I belonged. In fact, I have an experience from an hour ago that I shared. So coming to this panel, I had a reserved parking spot with my name on it. So I see the reserved parking spot, so I parked my car in my spot. And this guy was driving by, and he yells, "That's reserved, can't you read?" And I was just like, great, this is my life. This is literally my life. That was my spot, but they just drove off and just like assumed that, they probably assumed I'm like someone from another country who can't read English and can't park in like correct spots. Anyways, this stuff happens all the time. At some point you just get really good at, releasing and venting with your friends late at night, and then you go to work the next day and you're just back to you. So that's my advice for you. Hang in there and find other girls and talk to them about your experiences.
So for me, I think when I was younger, my parents got me a lot of puzzles and a lot of games that helped me build that confidence, allowed me to think about how to solve problems. And I really love that. And I have 2 boys. One of them's in college, the other one's high school, junior in high school. So when they were young, I bought them puzzles all the time because I'm a big believer in puzzles. And when they started playing video games, I monitored all the video games, and anything that had problem solving, I'm like, you can play as much of this game as you want. But this one, shooting, we're going to limit that. So there was that balance that and they really thrive with that kind of games right now, and they still play board games, and they still enjoy that. So for parents, I'd say, the puzzles are great. Any kind of a puzzle, electronic games that get the kids thinking, they're great. And so I encourage every parent. On the side where women, for the girls, I would say we are now at the place in our lives where we're looking for colleges for my younger son. And whenever I go to a school, he's looking into engineering. Whenever I go, I ask the women to men ratio in the classroom. And it seems like the schools are going out of their ways to really make sure that their doors are open to women, and that they're ready to take in and support female students. So that's really encouraging. I think we're living in a time when the change is happening, and there's going to be a lot more opportunities for girls than they did for all of us, I think, even including you. So I think it's a great time to take advantage of that. I know I work with a lot of academics, and they always talk about the new programs that they have for women and girls, and that's really, really encouraging. So I encourage everyone to take advantage of that.
Great, thank you so much. We'll take a couple of questions. We're running a little bit behind, but we'll take a couple of questions. After the questions, you can follow these awesome women to the signing table across from the cafe. They'll be signing trading cards. We do have some trading cards that are already signed, but they're very, very cool. So make sure you get those signed. And if you have any questions that we don't get to address now, you're more than welcome to ask them questions at the signing table. So does anybody have a question? Great. No. Yes.
How would you encourage your child to find their purpose, their calling? What activities, what things would you suggest?
I will suggest that you expose them as much things as you can. I actually have 4 children, and 2 of them special needs. So growing as a mother with kids that have special needs, it was hard at the beginning. So I tried to expose them as much as I could to everything, right? And now that they're older, my youngest one is graduating from high school, and 3 of them are in college. Each one choose a different path, and every single time they come and say, I want to be communications majors and artists, and I always tell them, I don't doubt, you can do it, go for it, I support you. I do want that diploma. So I try to expose them to everything I do and everything, there is out there. Because we do want girls in STEM, but I think also a lot of us have an artistic side. And so we have to explore that, and we have to be understand that, maybe, in my case, being an engineer, I would choose my children to be engineer. It's not probably their path. And so I try to be very diverse on, exposing them and all this other stuff. So, yeah.
So now that you think that I raised my kids playing video games all the time, let me balance that out a little bit. So we have book clubs. Book clubs. Our family has a book club. It's just the 4 of us, and we pick a book. Everyone brings their own book, and we pick one every month, and we just sort of share our ideas. And the kids bring their own books. It's usually sci-fi. And we bring some other books. So it gets them to read. It gets us to discuss different things. It gets us to see what they're excited about, and it gets them to think about different things. So this has been a really amazing experience for us as parents to listen to our children read the books that we read when we were their age and get their ideas about, and I can't recommend it enough.
I recommend reading also, and it's not just because I'm a librarian. Highly recommend it. It's great.
So I'm not a parent but I just wanted to add, I think one misconception I found that's really harmful is that you have to have it all figured out from early on. And that once you choose it in college or you start working, well, don't change your career now, because then you have to start from square one. And I think that fear, it's fine not to find your passion initially, but I know a lot of my friends who are in careers they don't like that are not their passion because they're too afraid to switch out. So I think this feeling of failure is okay, and changing your mind is okay, would enable someone to switch to something they like more.
I always look at that as growing.
Good. Yeah.
So I know that a lot of you have children. How were you able to balance your careers with raising your kids? How did you find that out?
Well, I can tell you, I had no life. So my path to career is completely different from Spanish here, because remember when I was telling you that I went to school and I dropped out and I waited 10 years to go back to school? That's the 10 years that I took, and I had 4 children. So I stayed home. I was a stay-at-home mom, for a couple years, because I needed to be there with, my 4 children. So when my youngest one went to first grade, I was like, I need to go back to school, because my two special needs kids needed a parent that was going to be able to support them and be the moral support. So knowing the consequences of having a child like this, because I did research that most of these children ended up in jail, dead, drug addicts, you name it. I was like, I'm not going to let my kids to be that, to have that life. I don't want them to have life. So I went back to work, saved for 2 years, and then paid for my school and the after-school program where my kids can actually, be at. So, and in the meantime, I was working too. And through that process, I ended up being a single mom. So, the path was really hard. There was time that I only slept like 3 hours, and I can tell you, it was, really hard. And then I also have to manage life, my kids, going to therapy and all this other stuff. And then going to the university again, my bachelor's degree and then my master's degree. So for me, it was really hard, but, I made myself a plan. I had a 5-year plan, and I had a semester plan. So every time I past 6 months, I review my semester schedule and work, and I plan for it. And then it was towards that 5-year goal. And, and I just made it work, and I made this huge sacrifices. I didn't have a life, but, I was able to get a degree, and all my 3 kids are, in college. They're pursuing a career, and, my kids are, in their own way, they're successful, because they had to overcome difficulties, and they had, and I'm very proud of them, every single one of them.
Yeah, it's a good question. When I had my kids, I would say there are 3 ways I've made it work so far. The job that I've had has been flexible in terms of allowing me to bring my kids with me to different events. When I travel, they would travel with me. But that required having someone come with me. And so I had both a mom and a mother-in-law who supported me in my traveling, and I travel a lot for my job. So, and I really felt strongly about having my babies with me. I would nurse them. I really wanted to give them that. And but it was hell. Really, it really was like, you shouldn't do it if you want to have a calm life, because there's, packing in the middle of the night. Also, you have to write grades. So, having support from my mom and mother-in-law, my kid's dad, and then my job. And I had 2 amazing mentors at work, both who had kids and who were my bosses, and they were there for me again and again. And I hope that will continue to be a possibility more and more in the workplace as more women have kids in the workplace, to say, yeah, I understand you have to stay home with your kid today because they're sick, and you can't send them to school when they're sick as much as you feel like you can't miss that meeting. So it's really hard, but at the same time, I think also, I don't know how the whole then also keeping your marriage. I don't know how that works. So it's I don't know. It's you do what you can do, and then you, at the same time, it's really been awesome because I have this great career and I have earning potential, and my kids have a really good role model for someone, you know, and I'm a very happy person, actually. And I think the sense of humor, I went through kind of a dark spot actually recently, where I think because of raising kids and this really difficult, like raising kids and having a career and being a boss and just having so much on my plate, like I kind of forgot to have fun. And so one huge piece of advice I give people is even when it gets the toughest of tough, find the humor in it. Whether it's a comedy show on TV or something on Amazon Prime or a really funny friend, but if you can laugh every day, then I think you're gonna be fine. So this is one of my new mottos is to laugh every day.
So when I actually came to California and started my first job, I had a reputation of having a childcare problem. And so I had to correct my boss several times when he talked about that. And when he said, oh, Scylla has a childcare problem, she can't join the meetings in person after 2. And I said, well, I don't have a problem, I just have kids. And I have to go home and make sure that they're fed and taken to their activities. So I had flexible work hours. I would start at 5, and I lived in Los Altos. To start work at 5 at Berkeley, I had to leave home around 4. So it was a long, long day for me. I'd start at 5, work until 2, leave Berkeley Lab, commute back to Los Altos, pick my kids from elementary school, and then run to their activities with them. And there would be times they were in a pool with a lifeguard, and I'd be on calls and writing papers, submitting things, writing proposals. It was a lot of work. Looking back, I can't even imagine how I did all of that. Like it requires superhuman powers almost. But what I realized is that I really enjoyed my job. And I really, really loved working. And I really, really liked the stuff that I produced. So if you work on something that you really, really love, it's all worth it. But if you're going to work saying, I have to go to work again, then I can imagine how difficult it would be to balance it all out. The other piece is that I was really lucky to have support all through. So I hired someone who, in case I couldn't go and pick the kids up on time, would go and pick them up. I had great neighbors. I had great other parents who helped me out. There were times that they would call me, your son's alone in the waiting area again. Do you want me to pick him up? I'm like, yes, please, I'll be there in 5 minutes. So these things happen. You have to realize that you can't be a super mom. Things are going to fall sometimes. You just have to make sure that you prioritize those that can fall and you don't care about. The type A personality is really difficult, but you learn to relax some of your own constraints and some of your own issues and let it go. I think for me, the most important thing is my kids' happiness and well-being. And if I'm stressed and if I'm stressing them out, I'm not doing my job as a mother. So I try to relax, even we may be sometimes late for things, I try to relax and keep a lighter environment most of the time.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you. We have to cut it off now because we're actually running with people going nuts. So thank you very much, ladies, for coming. It's been a very pleasure having you here. Is it awesome or what? Awesome. Okay, so we have, they're going to be walking over to the signing table, which is directly across the room, across from the cafe. And they will be signing their training cards. If you have any other questions for them, that would be a great place to talk to them. They'll be there for a little while. Thank you again for volunteering to take part of your day with us. We really appreciate it. All right, thanks everyone for coming. Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for coming. I apologize for running a little bit late. You guys are going to love this presentation. Dr. Pascal Lee is a planetary scientist at the Mars Institute, SETI, and the NASA Ames Research Center. He has an ME in geology and geophysics from the University of Paris and has a PhD in astronomy and space sciences from Cornell University. And as you will see, Dr. Lee is everything Mars. Do you guys like to hear about Mars? Are you super excited? I'm super excited. And I think you're going to find his presentation both fascinating and entertaining. And after his presentation, he will be signing his trading cards at the signing table, which is across from the cafe. He'll be there. He will also be selling his book, which is called Mission Mars. It's a fantastic book for kids. I would show you a copy, but our copies for the library are currently checked out. And now, I was at NASA Ames yesterday picking up a spacesuit, which was beyond cool, and one of Dr. Lee's colleagues told me that we are really, really, really lucky to have him here today because he's always traveling. So this is a very special treat for us. He was here a couple of years ago, and it's just a very great pleasure to have him here. You guys are going to really enjoy his talk. He also has trading cards for his dog, and you're definitely going to want to get one of those too. Okay, so here's Dr. Pascal Lee. Enjoy the presentation.
Thank you, Erin. And I want to say a big thank you to the city of Santa Clara. I'm a resident in this city for organizing this. It's a very cool event. It's the first time I participate, and I'm really impressed by the attendance and the scale of it. I brought my dog. His name is King Kong. He works on our research project. We go up to the Arctic, and he comes up with us. He's a polar bear guard dog. He keeps our camp and our researchers safe while we're hunting for rocks. He's sniffing out polar bears and Arctic wolves. So anyway, you'll notice that he will bark if you applaud. So why don't you give that a try? Okay. So, but during most of my talk, he will be asleep, and that's because he's heard it before. So before I start, don't be shy. Who here would even consider going to Mars and coming back? Okay. All right. Good. So let's see if there's still as many people who are enthusiastic about this. I'm working on a book, this time for grown-ups, so it has more pages than my children's book. It's because adults need more explanations. But the book is structured this way. I'll talk to you about what a human mission to Mars is, why would we want to go, how will we go, when will we go, and ultimately, who will go. Okay? And so I'm going to go through the motions of this book. So what is a human mission to Mars? Let's say you have to plan one. What are you up against? Well, this is a diagram showing the planets, the main planets of our solar system, the ones that are closest to the sun. And you can see the Earth here, the third rock from the sun. The planets are not shown in terms of their true distances between each other. They're much farther apart. But this diagram is correct in terms of the relative sizes of all these bodies in the solar system. And look at how big the sun is compared to the Earth or our moon. That little thing next to the Earth is our moon. Okay? Now, we've been to the moon, and so now we want to go further into space. It's still a small step, but we have two options. We can go to Venus, or we can go to Mars. Venus would be a very bad idea because even though it's much more similar to the Earth in size, it's a very, very hot place. It's closer to the sun. The temperature at the surface of Venus is plus 495 degrees Celsius. That's the temperature inside a pizza oven. Okay. The atmospheric pressure is crushing. When you're standing at the surface of Venus, the atmospheric pressure is 90 bars. That's what you have on the Earth in the ocean or in the sea at a depth of 2,700 feet. Okay, so you would be crushed if you weren't in some sort of a spaceship that looked like a submarine. And then there are clouds around Venus at all times. Okay, so you cannot see the stars when you're at the surface of Venus. It's overcast at all times, and it rains in the middle of the atmosphere. Because the rain doesn't reach the ground, it's too hot near the surface for the rain to reach the ground. So it rains sort of in the middle of the atmosphere from the upper middle to the bottom middle. And that rain is made of sulfuric acid. So you don't want to be hanging out where it rains on Venus anyway. So this is why Mars all of a sudden is a lot more attractive, because even though it's farther from the sun, it's a little less close than Venus is from the Earth. It's the cool planet next door. It's not so far that you could not survive and plan for the cold temperatures of Mars. Come on in, welcome. All right, so how far is Mars? At the top here, you see a diagram showing the Earth and our moon. Look at how far our moon is. The Earth, that's the moon. Okay. Now, if you have a regular rocket, like the Saturn V rocket in the Apollo days, it takes you 3 days to go to the moon. Once you get there, you can spend as much time as you want around the moon, and then you can come back. It's another 3 days. You can leave for the moon on a Monday morning. You get there Wednesday night. You spend Thursday exploring the moon. Friday morning, you fly back. Sunday night, you're back home. Monday morning, you're back at work. Okay? You can go to the moon and back within a week. Mars is much farther. Okay? At the bottom, you see the sun, with the Earth going around the sun. The Earth takes 1 year to go around the sun. That's what defines a year. And Mars is traveling farther out and also more slowly. So the Earth is constantly passing Mars. Every 26 months, the Earth passes Mars, and then sometimes the Earth is closer to Mars when they're both on the same side compared to the sun. Sometimes when the Earth and Mars are on opposite sides of the sun, they are at their maximum distance. And at that point, this maximum distance is 1,000 times farther than the moon is from the Earth. Okay, 1,000 times farther. Yep. How much time it will take? Yeah, good question. That's my next slide. You see? Very good question. So that's the logical question that comes up because Mars is so far away. Let's say you start here from the Earth using good chemical propulsion, or better still, if you had nuclear propulsion, it would take you about 6 months to get to Mars. Okay? And then once you get to Mars, you cannot come back immediately. I mean, you could, but it's very expensive fuel-wise. You want to wait for the Earth and Mars to reposition themselves so that you can find the best time, the cheapest time to come back to the Earth. And that means that you have to wait around Mars or on Mars for 18 months. That's a year and a half. And then it's another 6 months to travel back. So altogether, you're gone 6 months plus 18 plus 6 months. That's 30 months, 900 days, 2.5 years. Who's still going to Mars? All right. I see fewer hands. Okay. So where do we stand in terms of our experience in space so far? The longest space flight, in other words, the single space flight that any human being has ever done, the longest one lasted 437 days, 18 hours. That's a Soviet medical doctor, Valery Polyakov. He's still alive. He lives in Russia. He went around the Earth. I consider him to be one of the most unlucky people because he went around the Earth hundreds of times and he's back in Russia. But anyway, he has the single longest space flight, on record. The person who spent the most time in space, not on a single flight, but by adding 5 missions together, is Gennady Padalka. He spent 878 days in space. That's 2.4 years. Okay, so he's the world record holder now. He spent 2.4 years of his life in space. For the U.S., the longest single space flight record is held by Scott Kelly. It was established just last year and a half ago, 340 days. And then just last week, Peggy Whitson of the United States established the longest cumulative time spent in space for an American astronaut, and it's 534 days and counting. So she's essentially, you should compare her time with Gennady Padalka's, okay? She's still a little ways away, but she'll be catching up on him. All right, but these are numbers that are getting close to what it would take to go to Mars, okay? We don't have quite yet a single person who spent on a single flight 2.5 years away from the Earth, but we're building up time for that. Yep. How many days? 6 months to get to Mars. So that's 6 months, so that's 180 days. 180, you gotta take some reading. I would borrow some books from this library. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
My question is, I have a comment that my friend said it takes a lot of days to go to the sun, driving the car all over the
Oh, it takes a lot of days to drive to well, the sun is pretty far away from us. It's 149 million kilometers, okay? But when Mars is on the other side of the sun from us, obviously Mars is even farther away. If you want to think about it in terms of driving time, okay, to drive to the moon, let's say you were driving at 70 miles per hour, okay, non-stop, no bathroom breaks, no gas station breaks. You drive 70 miles per hour. It'll take you 5 months to get to the moon. 5 months. 24 hours a day, okay? To the sun, a lot longer. I mean, the sun would be 5 months. Mars is 1,000 times. It'd be about 500 times 5 months. So a long time. Several years.
Pascal?
Yep.
Can we ask the audience, can you please hold your questions until the end, just in the interest of time? I want to make sure that he gets through his presentation.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Thank
Plus,
you.
I'll be around to answer more
Yeah, you
questions
can
at
ask
the
him his
table.
questions when he goes to the signing table.
Yeah,
Thank you.
That's a good plan. So, look at the sizes of these worlds. The Earth on the left, the Moon, which is quite a bit smaller than the Earth, okay, and Mars. On Earth, you feel pretty heavy because it's a pretty big ball and it's exerting an attraction, a gravitational attraction. So this is why you're sitting down and not standing, because you feel heavy on this planet. You need to rest. On the Moon, gravity is 6 times less than what it is on the Earth. 6 times less. So let's say you weigh 100 pounds on the Earth. Well, first of all, consider yourself lucky. But second, on the Moon, you would feel that you weigh only 17 pounds. Okay? This is why the Apollo astronauts were just hopping around, so easily. If you go to Mars, it's halfway in size. You will feel that you weigh 38 pounds. Okay? So, almost less than half your weight on the Earth. This is why I always say going to Mars is a good weight loss program. All right. But the reality of Mars is really not very friendly, okay? On the left, I have the good things that are going for you if you plan a trip to Mars. The day on Mars lasts 24 hours and 37 minutes. It's a complete coincidence. There's no, I could use 37 extra minutes per day. I don't know about you. But we'll have no problems adapting to that. So that's a very friendly aspect. Water, there's plenty of water on Mars, mostly in the form of ice, underneath the ground, underneath the surface, at the polar caps. As soon as you're farther than 60 degrees north or farther south than 60 degrees south, there's ice immediately at the surface. So you can just scrape off the dirt, the dust. You will find clean ice. You can chip away at it, put it in a champagne bucket, and toast. Okay. Gravity, we just talked about this. So these are the things that we think are going to be helpful and friendly to us. On the right, I've listed from top to bottom, in chronological order of cause of death, the things that will kill you. Okay. And needless to say, the only one that matters really is the first one, because the others are academic, since you would be dead already. let's say you walk onto the Martian surface dressed like the way you are, okay? These are the things that will kill you first. Within seconds, you will essentially die of your blood boiling. And that's because right now your blood contains oxygen and nitrogen that you just breathed in, okay? And these gases are dissolved inside your blood. It's like the carbon dioxide that's dissolved inside the can of Coke, okay? It's not in the form of bubbles when the can is still sealed. It's dissolved in the liquid, all right? But let's say you release the pressure. That's what you do when you walk onto the surface of Mars. The atmospheric pressure on Mars is so low, okay, there's almost no air around you, that all these gases that are in your blood would not be kept dissolved in your blood. They would bubble up. Okay, it would be like popping a can of Coke. So you would fizz to death on Mars. Okay, your blood would literally boil. This would take a few seconds. Fortunately, very long seconds. It would be a very cruel and unusual way of dying. Okay, this is why you must never go outside without a spacesuit. Okay, the spacesuit will maintain pressure. Okay, there's air inside the spacesuit. It will maintain pressure on around your skins to prevent the gases in your blood to boil. Let's say that didn't kill you. The atmosphere is unbreathable anyway. It's made of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is the gas that you exhale. You need to breathe oxygen. You exhale carbon dioxide. Well, all you would have to breathe on Mars is carbon dioxide. That's toxic for us. You would die of lack of oxygen, okay, hypoxia. So that will take a few minutes, painful minutes, and that's if the low pressure hadn't killed you. Then, if that didn't kill you, the temperatures will. Okay, the average temperature on Mars is minus 80 degrees Fahrenheit on average. Okay. Now, at the equator, in the middle of the afternoon, in the summer, it can get kind of like almost as warm as here today. Bear in mind that the air is still very thin, so you'd still boil to death. You would just do it under a pleasant temperature. But most of the time, the planet is very cold. Okay. Then you have the dust. The dust will kill you. The temperatures will kill you in a matter of hours. The dust will kill you in a matter of days to weeks. The dust of Mars is very toxic. It's also very fine-grained, and it's also very abrasive. Three bad things about the dust on Mars: toxic, abrasive, very fine-grained. Okay, so it's toxic. It's made of. It contains perchlorates and peroxides. Think of hydrogen peroxide. You put hydrogen peroxide on a wound to eat away, okay, at your wound to clean it up. Well, the soil is made of hydrogen peroxide in some sense in solid state. Okay? And there are other kinds of peroxides in hydrogen peroxide. So it's a very nasty material. It's also got perchlorate. Perchlorates will attack your thyroid. Okay, over the matter of a few weeks. If you breathe in the dust, you will get sick. You'll become nauseous, and you will eventually die. Okay, after a few weeks. In the movie The Martian, that's one of the biggest mistakes in the movie. I know Andy Weir well, the author of The Martian. Okay, he and I are kind of like friends, although we were better friends than when before I started criticizing his book. But we're still friends. He lives in Mountain View, and he's a very smart guy. Okay, he understands all the issues with his book. And to be fair to him, he wanted to fix some of them, but the publisher said, no, we're not touching this. This is a good story as it is. We got to run with this. Okay, and then the movie did the same thing. Anyway, first of all, the guy could not have been blown over by the dust storm at the beginning because the air on Mars is too thin. Even though the winds can be fast, okay, if you're standing on Mars in the strongest hurricane speed winds on Mars, there's so little air that you would hardly feel a breeze. Okay, it'd be like standing in the jet stream in the stratosphere of the Earth. It's passing by you at 200 miles an hour, but you would hardly feel a breeze. Your hair would not get messed up. Okay, so you would be. So there's no way that you could get blown over like you could see in the movie The Martian. But the other thing with the dust is that Mark Watney, the astronaut, is shoveling Martian soil into the cabin to grow potatoes. Okay, well, that's a really bad idea because the dust is toxic, chemically toxic. I said it was fine-grained, so over time it's going to clog the pores of your lungs. You won't be able to breathe. You'll have asthma and then pneumonia. And then the dust is also very abrasive, so it will tear up the pores of your lungs, okay, the tissues of your lungs. So it's really a bad idea to bring in Martian soil. And since Mark Watney was supposed to be such a good botanist, he should have known that you can grow plants with just water and nutrients. You do not need soil. That's called hydroponics. Okay, we do this commonly on the Earth. Okay. Now Andy really hates me. Okay, there's more. And then radiation. Radiation is bad news. There's radiation from the sun, there's radiation from deep space at the surface of Mars. We'll talk about radiation later. So why would we even go? Well, that's because Mars is really intriguing, and one of the ways in which it's intriguing is that it had liquid water flowing at its surface early in its history, and even now in recent times. Okay? So throughout the planet's history, there's been liquid water, not in huge amounts. Scientists are divided as to whether there were oceans in the past or not. I don't believe in the evidence for the oceans. I think it's pushed too far. There is nevertheless evidence for water throughout Martian history in small amounts at the surface, and that's really intriguing. The reason why it's intriguing is it's because of the connection between liquid water and life on Earth. Okay? On Earth, all Earth life needs liquid water. There's no exception. Even when you are living as a little microbe in the desert on the Earth, you still need liquid water. You will get it in the form of dew or fog in the morning over the desert, but you will somehow find a way to get liquid water. Okay? And the other rule about life and water on the Earth is that on Earth, everywhere where there is liquid water, there is life in it, if the water is clean. Okay? So, there's the one-to-one connection between life and liquid water on Earth. And then meanwhile, we can see that Mars has always had liquid water in some amount near its surface throughout its history. So, we think that Mars might be a good place for life to have somehow started and could still be there. So, to me, that's the main scientific reason for going to Mars. But here I have a long list that I've collected over time, over the years, of reasons to go to Mars. Okay? And you don't have to read them all. I will just point out that I just mentioned the one that's at the very top. To me, that's the main exciting reason to go personally. That's my favorite reason, science. But other people have proposed other things. Elon Musk, for example, likes to become a multi-planet species. He thinks that we should go to Mars as an insurance policy. Okay? We shouldn't all be on Earth. What if something bad happens to Earth? We should go to Mars. Okay? As well, to have a separate branch of humanity there. I offer $1 every time somebody comes up with a reason that has not already been captured here. And I was giving this talk not too long ago in Australia, and somebody raises his hand and says, hey, what about this one? Establish a new colony of prisoners and convicts. Okay? That's, if you recall, how Australia was founded as a nation. Okay? So I tried to make the case that this was already captured in store waste, but that didn't go too well. So I paid out my $1, but I made sure it was an Australian dollar. Okay. So anyway, the point though is none of these matter. That's the thing. None of these really matter unless you are super wealthy and have your own pet peeve reason to go to Mars and you want to do it for that reason. Okay. The only reason that matters, the only motivation that has ever made people explore is when it serves the national interest. And this sounds a bit cynical, but this is really true. Okay? If you look at President Jefferson, who sent Lewis and Clark out west, okay? That was a very expensive expedition at the time. President Jefferson was interested in science, but that's not why he sent Lewis and Clark out west. He sent them out west because we had to know who was living out there, what navigation routes we could follow, what trading we could do with the people out west. And so it was in the national strategic interest, the United States was still a young country, to figure out who we could live with and trade with out west. Okay? So that's why the Lewis and Clark expedition was sponsored and supported. Same thing with President Kennedy and Apollo. Okay? We did not go to the moon in the mid-60s because all of a sudden we were interested in moon rocks. Okay? In the 60s, we were interested in all kinds of rocks, but the moon rocks was not the reason. It was all about politics. The Soviet Union was a threat. Communism was ruling a good part of the earth already, and we needed to do something in space that was far enough in the future, difficult enough to do, that we had a chance to catch up, because we were somewhat behind the Soviet Union in the early days of the space race. And so the answer, Mr. President, is to put a man on the moon and return him safely to the earth. Okay, so this is why we did the Apollo program. Okay, it all has to do with geopolitics. So without belaboring this more, and there are many more examples, the reason why we haven't been to Mars yet is because Congress has not been convinced, or any president so far, that it was in our national strategic interest to make a push for it now. Okay? People see the advantage of doing it down the road, but they haven't seen the advantage now. Now, I would contend, and I have plots to show for this, but I didn't bring them today because I want to keep it user-friendly. I would contend that the biggest benefit from the Apollo program was what it did for STEM education. Okay? Sure, we beat communism. That was the immediate result of being on the moon first. Okay? Sure, we brought back moon rocks, and so we learned a lot about the moon, and as a scientist, I'm delighted we did that. But the real benefit of the Apollo program was that it stimulated an entire generation of young people to go into science, technology, engineering, and math. Okay? The Jeff Bezoses and the Elon Musks of the world were all inspired by the Apollo program. And I have a plot that shows how something happened. I have a plot that shows. Yep. Oh, I have a plot that I didn't bring, but it shows how universities in the United States were delivering twice as many degrees in science, technology, engineering, and math during the narrow window of the Apollo program than it does normally. Okay, and so to me, this would be the greatest benefit of going to Mars, as opposed to any other destination. It would be an extremely stimulating thing for the country to do. All right. I might add right now that China, just 2 years ago, landed a robotic rover on the moon. And we poo-pooed that because the United States and Russia did that 40 years ago. And China, within the next 10 years, will probably land a human being a Chinese astronaut on the moon. And when that happens, I'm sure there will be some people who poo-poo that because the United States did that 50 years ago by then. Okay? But we're missing the point. The point is China right now is exciting an entire generation of kids, of young people, to go into science, technology, engineering, and math. And they are going to become if not the competition, at least a powerful force for our economy to deal with and to face. Okay? So events like STEM Central today are really important, perhaps more so than what you might suspect. Anyway, how are we going to go to Mars? Okay, it's far away. You're going to go for a long trip. You need a big rocket to take you there. Okay. On the lower right, I show you the space shuttle. On the left, it's retired. The Saturn V rocket, we needed one of those to get you to the moon. And then the two rockets on the right, the two rockets on the right are the new rocket that NASA is building, the SLS, Space Launch System. It's being built as we speak in Alabama and a little bit also in Louisiana. Okay. And the Space Launch System's first flight is scheduled for late 2018. I don't know what you're doing, but I'm going to Florida in late 2018 to watch the launch. Okay? When it launches, it will be the most powerful rocket ever launched into space. Okay? It will be spectacular. If it works, it will be spectacular. If it doesn't, it will be spectacular. Okay? So you should really go. Now, NASA is building two versions of this rocket, a smaller one that's for crew and a larger one for cargo. To go to Mars, unlike going to the moon where you just need one of these large rockets, to go to Mars we will need 7 SLS rockets per mission. Okay, so here's the plan. This is from a children's book, but it's a generic plan. And you have on the lower left here the 7 rockets lined up. Of course, they're not going to be lined up at the same time at the Cape. There's no need for that. You launch the first 4 first, and they're not even launched at the same time. They're launched, months apart. But with these 4 first launches, you put together 2 spaceships. That's step number 2 there. 2 spaceships. These spaceships have nobody on board. They are robotic spaceships. You're going to send those 2 spaceships to Mars. You see Mars over there. 2 to 4 years ahead of time. And the reason why you want to do this is because you don't want to travel with the car that you're going to drive on Mars, or the house you're going to live in on Mars. Okay? You don't need to travel with all that stuff. If anything, you want to make sure that it has arrived on Mars in good shape ahead of time. Because you don't want to go travel to Mars with your house and your car, and then by the time you get to Mars, something happens and your house crashes, and then your cars as well, and then you're left with nothing. So you're going to send all this stuff that you don't need to travel to Mars with ahead of time, and you're going to set them up on Mars, make sure that they're all in one place, in one piece, and working. Once you've established that, now it's time to launch 2 more SLS rockets. They're going to put together your spaceship. Okay? And then, once your spaceship has been put together, notice that it even has an inflatable section there at the front. We call that the space marshmallow, also the astronaut bouncy house. Once your spaceship is put together, now it's time for you to launch in the 7th little rocket. Come on in. Come on in. It's time for you to launch in the little rocket, and it's you and your 6 crewmates. So 7 of you are going to Mars in this scenario. Okay. And this spaceship is still around the Earth at this point. You connect with it, you go inside, you make sure every switch works. You come with fresh food as well. That's what the small rocket carries. And once everything is set, is ready, you press the big red button and off you go to Mars. Okay. All right, so this is what the inside might look like. All right. The only part that will land on Mars is the little cone at the front. That's the Mars lander. That's the only part where once you get to Mars, the 7 of you will squeeze into and then land on Mars. But the rest of the time, all of this will be connected and you'll be floating around. I don't have time to go through all this. You can read about it in my book, but I want to point out a few things about the astronaut bouncy house part. Notice that there are sandbags lining the walls of your spaceship there. But they're not sandbags. These bags contain water and food. And the reason why you want to surround yourself with water and food is because both water and food contain hydrogen. Water is H2O, contains hydrogen. Food has carbohydrates, contains hydrogen. All right? And hydrogen, as it turns out, is a very good dampener, absorber of space radiation. So by surrounding yourself with about 1 meter thick of food and water, you are effectively shielding yourself from a lot of the harmful space radiation that you're going to be exposed to on your way to Mars and back. Okay? So there's good news and bad news with this plan. The good news is you're thirsty, you drink water, okay, now you're no longer thirsty, but you have to go to the bathroom, and you see there's a toilet there. You go pee-pee, and your urine gets piped into the service module where it gets cleaned up, recycled, and back into a bag where you can drink water again. And that's because you're going to Mars on a 6 months out, 6 months back, a 1 year round trip inside the spaceship. You cannot possibly take fresh water for 7 people for 1 year with you to Mars. You can only take so much water, and then you're going to recycle it as you go. Okay? So we already do this on the space station. Astronauts have machines that are already recycling their urine and their sweat. And so a few weeks into your trip to Mars, you will be drinking each other's recycled urine and sweat. Okay, who's still going to Mars? Okay. I see new hands raised. That's worrisome. Okay. So, that's the good news. Here's the bad news. Food. Okay, you're hungry. You each have your favorite food in a pouch, in a bag, okay? You can tell them, hey, I love, curries and sushi, okay? So if I were to go to Mars, I would have bags and bag full of rehydratable sushi and rehydratable curry, okay? But the point is, it all ends the same way. You have to go to the bathroom, and then what happens? We cannot recycle poop. NASA is not even trying. We did all the studies in the 60s and even in the 50s. It's extremely difficult to recycle poop. And in fact, if you write a proposal to NASA today and say, hey, I have a new idea, I want to recycle poop, they'll say, no, we're not funding this, okay? Because we already know that it's super difficult to do for a bunch of reasons. Anyway, what are you going to do with the poop? You cannot recycle it. You can't open a window and throw it out into space. That's not good. First of all, there's no window that opens. Second, you don't want to pollute space. So what are you going to do with it? Well, you have to remember that your poop still contains plenty of hydrogen. And the hydrogen is necessary to keep you protected from space radiation. So what you have to do is collect your poop in a Ziploc bag, emphasis on lock, okay? And I might add very carefully, okay? And then that bag goes back on the wall where you took the food in the first place. I recommend very careful labeling, okay? Because when you leave the Earth, you're going to be surrounded by about a year's worth of food, okay, for the entire crew. By the time you come back from Mars, it'll be mostly everybody's poop and your own, okay, with a few bags of food left. So this is where the labeling will be very important. This is not a joke. This is really the way it will have to be. On the space station, we're not putting poop bags on the walls and all this. First of all, because we can bring fresh food and take away poop regularly with supply flights. But second, the space station, even though it's above the Earth's atmosphere, it's still inside the Earth's magnetic field. And so we are protected somewhat from space radiation, okay, when you're on board the space station. It's not as bad as if you were in deep space. Here going to Mars, you are in deep space, okay, if not in deep. Okay. All right. The big day arrives. Time to land on Mars. So you all 7 of you cram into the Mars lander at the front. You zip up your spacesuits. You are tight like sardines in there. You enter the Martian atmosphere. The parachutes deploy, if you're lucky. Then you descend through the atmosphere. Then you jettison the heat shield because you don't need it anymore. And then before you fire the retro rockets that will just cushion your landing at the end, you jettison your parachutes. Then you drop for a few seconds like a rock. And then the retro rockets come on. And then you've landed on Mars, hopefully safely. Now, this is not the house you're going to live in on Mars because you just packed like sardines in this thing and wearing your spacesuits, okay? This is just a pod that got you to the surface of Mars. Hopefully, you've landed right next to all that stuff that you sent to Mars 2 to 4 years ahead of time, okay? And as in within walking distance, okay? That's the plan. This is the plan, okay? So I promised my editor and publisher that I will not show every page of my children's book, but I don't see her here right now. So this is what the inside might look like. Anyway, you can go through all the details later, but what if you don't land next to the habitat? What if you land too far away and you cannot walk to this? Well, you can teleoperate, remote control the rover and have it come pick you up. Okay, that's called the airport shuttle scenario. All right. But what if you land way too far away, even beyond the range of the rover? Well, goodbye, enjoy your first and last spacewalk, and we will have good memories of you. All right. So you can learn more about what it's going to be like to live inside the habitat. I'm going to talk to you about how to explore this planet, which looks a lot like this, okay, rock and sand. So to do that, we've been going for the past 20 years now to this incredible place on Earth called Devon Island. It's in Canada. It's beyond the Arctic Circle. It's very near the North Pole of the Earth. Devon Island is the largest uninhabited island on Earth. Okay, when you are there, you are the population of Devon Island. And there's a giant meteorite impact crater there called Houghton Crater. this is what the landscape on Devon Island looks like. It's cold, dry, unvegetated, rocky. What does this remind you of? Okay, Antarctica, yeah, that's a good point. Mars, okay. So we have a permanent base. It's actually privately operated. I mean, we do research for NASA, but it's operated by the Mars Institute and the SETI Institute. And those of you who run businesses that are very successful, you can approach me to have your name put on one of these tents if you want. Okay. We're flying more and more drones, so there should be more and more aerial photos and footage of our camp. But this is, at this point, the largest privately operated polar research station on Earth, okay? And the only one dedicated to advancing space exploration. So already by managing this base, we are learning how to do that in the future on Mars, where we might have an international base, a bit like an Antarctic research station. But most importantly, we're learning how to explore Mars in this environment, okay? Should you have each your own rover or share one, like we did on the moon? So let me talk to you about two things. I'll talk to you about spacesuits and rovers. This here is the state-of-the-art spacesuit, okay? It's the best spacesuit we have. It's called the EMU, and it's designed by NASA and US industry, in particular the company Hamilton Sunstrand. It weighs 300 pounds on Earth, 300 pounds. Thankfully, you don't need a spacesuit to walk around, so you don't have to carry it. And when we use it like this on the space station, or recently on the space shuttle, you were weightless, so you had the inertia, the bulk, if you will, of a 300-pound suit, but you didn't have the weight bearing down on your shoulders. If you take this suit to the moon, where gravity is 6 times less, it would have a felt weight of 50 pounds. That's like a heavy backpack. You can manage that. And that's why going to the moon was even possible in the 60s. The astronauts had about a 300-pound suit. It felt like it weighed 50 pounds. They were able to hop around. If you take this same suit to Mars, it would have a felt weight of 125 pounds. Impossible to do field work in this suit. There's a big challenge. Humanity faces a big challenge to design a much better spacesuit for Mars. And the mass of the spacesuit has to be cut in half, so that on Earth it would weigh 150 pounds, not 300. So that by the time you take it to Mars, it will have a felt weight of about 50 to 60 pounds. Okay, it's a big challenge. The spacesuit, you have to remember, is not just clothing. It's a wearable spacecraft. It's got computers, life support system, waste disposal, radios, all kinds of regulation, micrometeorite shielding. It's a very complex piece of aerospace engineering. If I was your age, some of you younger ones, I would go to spacesuit design if I was interested in aerospace engineering, because you are essentially designing a spaceship that's shaped like a human being, and that is, to me, a very cool thing. Okay. So we've been testing ideas to make the spacesuit lighter on Devon Island, okay, in this landscape, so that we can go about our field work and at the same time test the design of a spacesuit. And bear in mind that your spacesuit also has to be able to withstand dust storms on Mars. We've done some wind tunnel tests. The risk is not that you're going to get blown away by or blown over by the winds. It's that the winds are still carrying dust, and the dust is very abrasive and can actually damage the fabric of your spacesuit, like is shown here with the scanning electron microscope image. Okay? So we have to come up with fabrics that are better than the existing spacesuit fabrics. We also have to do things that we never got to do on the moon, like rock climbing, because there are canyons on Mars to explore. Okay? So you need a very flexible suit as well. So this is the latest design for concept suit for Mars. Big boots to manage rock and sand. Gaiters, these are these rubber wrappers around your lower legs to protect your spacesuit from getting punctured and cut against sharp rocks. Okay? The worst sound you can hear when you're wearing a spacesuit is okay, that's very bad news. So you have to protect your lower legs because you might rub against rocks. Notice that on your wrist you have some sort of a smartphone. Okay? During the Apollo days, the astronauts had a checklist to remind them about steps to follow, to do this or that. it was actually literally a little binder, a spiral binder with rings and pages to flip. Okay. Now we're going to have a little smartphone on your wrist. You can also take selfies with it. Okay. This is a rear entry suit. So to enter the spacesuit or get out of it, you open the backpack. It swings open like a refrigerator door. Okay. And you climb in. Your feet go all the way down to the boots. You put on your headset, your Snoopy cap, and you insert your arms, and you or somebody else closes the backpack behind you, and now you're ready for your spacewalk. Okay. So this is the terrain that we're going to have to go explore. Lots of sand. To learn how to design a good suit with boots for sand, we sometimes go to the Mojave Desert in California. Here we are at the Dumont Dunes testing spacesuits. And then to get around, we're going to need rovers. We're going to need rovers. And here is the solution that was adopted on the moon. We were not on the moon for a very long time, so there was no need to really have each astronaut your own rover. The two astronauts shared one. And the lunar rover was electric. It was built by not GM, but by Boeing. And it was a very useful little vehicle, but you still could not take it very far away, but that was perfectly fine for what we were doing on the moon. For Mars, you're going to be there for much longer, and you're going to need more flexibility in how you do exploration. So each astronaut, each one of you will have your own ATV with your name on it, okay? And it will be an electric ATV powered by fuel cells, or maybe now nanocells, which would be even better, okay? And we found a way to cut down the mass of the spacesuit, and here's how. Some of the most heavy elements in your spacesuit are the oxygen tanks and the batteries in your backpack. What if we offloaded some of the spare oxygen tanks and spare batteries onto the ATV? While you're driving the ATV, you can recharge your backpack. It has a smaller oxygen tank and a small little battery pack. And then once you get to some place that's interesting, you step off of your ATV, and now you go explore, and you don't need to have a heavy backpack anymore. Okay? So that's one very promising way of doing this. The other thing, of course, is that your ATV will be a smart ATV. It won't just sit there where you parked it. It will follow you like a dog. Okay? Not like every dog, but some dogs. And so you find something interesting, you step off your ATV, you go pick up rocks, and then your ATV follows you. So you don't have to carry all the rocks back to it. Okay? You just turn around, it's right there. And if the ATV cannot follow you, then you shouldn't probably be there in the first place. So if the terrain is too dangerous. Okay? So that's what we're coming up with. Now, you still never go out alone, and this is the other person who's with you. You have a buddy who has his or her own ATV, and let's say one of the ATV breaks down. Well, that's okay. The other person will just come towards you, get rid of that suitcase that's at your back. That's a trunk with spare parts. And, well, in an emergency, you just have to do without spare parts. You just get rid of that box, and now you're going to reveal a seat that's facing backwards. And that person who has lost his or her ATV can just plug into your same spare oxygen and battery supply, and then you can go back to safety together. Okay, that's the plan. Like only NASA can. No. Okay. Now, that's for short road trips, a few miles. Let's say you want to go on a longer road trip. You need a pressurized rover. That's like the motorhome of Mars exploration. Okay, so you'd be living inside, dressed the way you are, maybe better, or not so well. And then to go out and explore Mars, you would then put on a spacesuit. Okay. So we've been field testing some concept pressurized rovers. I was actually lucky to be the first scientist pilot to test out this contraption back in Arizona a few years ago. It's called the Space Exploration Vehicle, and it's an amazing vehicle. It can turn on the spot. Literally all wheels are independent. So you can imagine them being configured in some sort of a circle, and then you just do a turn on yourself, and then it's a very maneuverable vehicle. Okay. And then the inside is actually very slick. If you are right-handed, you sit on the right and you joystick it from the right. If you're left-handed, you sit on the left and you joystick it from the left. Okay. This is when all those hours of video gaming might actually pay off. Okay. Now, Andy, this is why the pressurized rover in the Martian was not very well designed. Okay. First of all, notice that a pressurized rover needs to be shaped like a pressure vessel. Notice your propane tank that's beneath your barbecue is rounded, not angular. It's because you want the pressure on the inside to be even out. Okay? You don't want to have sharp angles where pressure would be applied and enhanced, and then you'd have a weak spot. So whenever you have a pressure vessel, you want something to have a rounded shape. This is why our pressurized rover is rounded. Okay? And this is actually not a good design for something that would have to hold pressure. It's not very well designed. But that's still okay. The real problem here is that every time this guy goes in and out of his rover, he opens the main door of the cabin. And so all the oxygen in the cabin rushes out into the Martian environment, and then you lose the oxygen of your cabin. Okay? And then to make things worse, he's coming back in with his spacesuit covered in dust. And if you remember, the dust is the last thing you want to breathe on Mars. So this is a really poorly designed pressurized rover. Okay? And now when you watch a movie, you can analyze it. The way NASA wants to do it is to keep your spacesuit outside at all times. It's covered in dust. You do not want to bring it into the cabin. So you dock your spacesuit on the outside of your rover on the back wall. It just hangs out there at the back at all times. And you go directly in and out of your spacesuit from the inside of the rover by opening the backpack door into the inside. Okay. There's a double door system, so the back of the backpack is nested in the back door of the rover, and it swings open and closes like that. Okay. So that way you never bring the dust into the cabin, you live cleanly, and you have a very good design. And also, every time you go for a spacewalk, you're not emptying out the entire volume of oxygen that you have inside your rover into the Martian landscape. It's too wasteful. Okay? You lose hardly any oxygen this way. So this is astronaut Rex Walheim, who was in the rover with me, demonstrating how to climb in and out of this suit port, it's called. It's a port that gives you access to your spacesuit. And you might think, well, that's not that easy to do a chin-up, okay, to swing your legs in and out of this, but it actually is, because remember, you're in Martian gravity. And so you can easily do your chin-up if you can't do it easily on the Earth. This thing can rove at night. On Devon Island, we're using Humvees to simulate how we might explore Mars in the future with pressurized rovers. Because we were getting our red Humvee stuck pretty often in sand or mud, we decided to get a second Humvee, and to get it to Devon Island, we got creative. We decided to drive it to Devon Island in the winter on the sea ice. That turned out into an epic expedition. It took 3 seasons to complete. We filmed a documentary about the whole journey, and it actually just got released, and it's now available on DVD and online as well. Okay. Passage to Mars. So when are we going to go to Mars? Well, right now we're going to keep using the space station into at least 2024, possibly beyond. Congress is starting to have some hearings about how we might extend the life of the space station beyond 2024. Up until now, under the Obama administration, NASA was directed to look into the idea of a mission to an asteroid, a deep space mission, not as far as Mars, but to a near-Earth asteroid, to see if we could at least get that going at an affordable cost, and then go to Mars a little bit later. This particular plan has now been abandoned as of about a month ago. So Congress and the White House have directed NASA to stop working on the asteroid redirect mission. And the current plan is to either go back to the moon although that's not really spelled out in any detail. A few years ago, I would have said that that's not a good step because we don't need to go back to the moon since we've been there already. But now that we are so far from the Apollo experience and that other nations are going to the moon, it might be hard to avoid going back to the moon. So one option for NASA is to actually do a return to the moon, hopefully without getting bogged down with too much moon activity, and leave it to the commercial sector to grow. And then with Mars, with NASA focusing on actually going to Mars, first by exploring Mars's moons. Mars has these two incredible little moons. Look at the scale bar, 2 kilometers. The bigger one, Phobos, is the size of Manhattan Island. Okay, if there were buildings, you could see them. That crater there is the size of Central Park. Okay. So the 2 moons of Mars are extraordinary places. Incidentally, gravity on Phobos is 1,700 times lower than on the Earth. So let's say you're standing on Phobos and you push yourself off, you would sort of rise slowly. It will take several minutes. You'd reach about half a mile in height, and then slowly fall back down. And then you would not contact the ground harder than when you push yourself off. Okay. Be a lot of fun to explore Phobos and Deimos. But more importantly, the view of Mars at Phobos would be spectacular. Okay. And I'm running a little behind, so I'm going to rush. Mars itself, 2040s. Okay, so those of you who are really young, you will see this. 2040s is just around the corner. It's in 25 years. Right. All right, and then there's the wild card. I just mentioned the NASA plan. What about the private sector? Elon Musk has come up with a plan, well, at least they expressed the desire to get humans to Mars by the late 2020s. So that's a big challenge. He's planning on building this giant rocket, and we'll have to fly several of those to get a large group of people to Mars. Okay. Some good signs, though, that Mars might actually be happening in our lifetimes. Just about a year and a half ago, NASA convened for the very first time in history the first workshop ever to pick a landing site for humans on Mars. Okay, so now we're getting very specific. And I led a team, actually, that proposed the Noctis landing site that's circled in white here. But 50 other sites were proposed, and they're still in the running right now, and NASA's not going to narrow down the choice for quite a while. But Noctis Landing, I thought we think was a particularly good site because it gives you access to the volcanoes, which might still be active on Mars. And so if you're looking for life that's still alive on Mars, the volcanoes would be a good place to go, a place that might be still warm, and if you can enter a lava tube, it might even be damp and wet. So wet with water, that could be really cozy for life. And then you could also have access to the canyons of Mars. And this is where Noctis Landing is, and you can see how close, in fact, it's inside the canyons of Mars. And so the canyons, think of them as a natural road cut. Okay, so this is the mother of all road cuts on Mars, and you could look for fossil life throughout the layers of ancient rocks, okay, that you would explore. The volcanoes, I just mentioned that. My favorite one is this one, Olympus Mons. It's the tallest mountain in the solar system. This is Mount Everest in the Black Triangle compared to the profile of Olympus Mons. It's a gigantic, gigantic volcano. When you're standing at the summit of Olympus Mons, you're essentially standing in space. The bulk of the Martian atmosphere is below you. Okay. If you close your eyelids, you will see sparks. That's cosmic rays hitting your retina. Okay. Time to head down. Okay, so who will go to Mars? Who will be this lucky person wearing a blue spacesuit, because blue is the complementary color of orange. It's the most visible color to contrast you with the Martian landscape. Okay. Whereas the moon was gray, so white was a good idea. Okay. Well, the crew size, we figure 5 to 8 people. 5 would be really short. 8, maybe one too many. I'm betting on 7. The crew selection criteria: should you have a gender mix, an ethnic mix, an international mix, a marital mix? These first four criteria are essentially political or social-political criteria. They don't necessarily mean that you will have a good crew. Okay, the crew might be more representative of humanity. The marital mix is the idea that you would have couples, married couples going into space. So let's say a crew of 7, you have 3 married couples and then the 7th person. Okay, so this is why it might be, and then of course married couples, you can imagine married couples working very well for 2.5 years together, confined in a spaceship. I can also think of it being possibly disastrous. But what we do know is that there'll be Renaissance people with many skills, okay? Because let's say you take 7 people, you need more than 7 skills. So each person will have to have training and be good at several things, okay? The doctor, for example, might also need to be a dentist, a surgeon, and a biologist, okay? So if you want to go to Mars, you should prepare to do a lot of training and studies. This is why we think they won't be young astronauts. The vast majority of the crew will likely be made of very seasoned astronauts. This is why movies and books that show you astronaut crews that are very young, okay, and dashing, well, that's not going to happen because young people have not had time, even though if they were smart, they just haven't had time to build experience. Experience takes time, not just smarts, it takes time. And so if you need to be skilled and experienced at several things, you're going to need a lot of time. Okay, so Peggy Whitson is 57 years old, okay? And I think that will be the average age of a crew going to Mars. They might take a young person to be the token young person to make fun of, but the vast majority of the crew will be made of, seasoned people. And then you need to have backups. This is my favorite picture showing you why you need a backup. This is a Soviet doctor in Antarctica doing an appendectomy, took out his appendix on himself because there was no other doctor on the expedition in Antarctica. And this was back in the 60s, and there was no plane to come rescue them and all that, okay? So he did the operation on himself, and he enlisted the aid of the only other technical person that was around him, who was a meteorologist. So if you want to avoid having to have an operation on Mars with your meteorologist, you should cross-train each other and have some redundancy in your skill set. These are the 5 qualities that I think are the most important in a crew member. Knowledge, health, motivation. Motivation. It's not just committing 2.5 years of your life to going to Mars. It's realizing that you're going to commit 10 to 20 years of training ahead of that without the certainty of ever going. I mean, a lot of people train for the moon and never made it. So it's going to take a lot of motivation to be ready for Mars. You have to be adaptable. You have to be altruistic, unselfish. Think of others before yourself. Okay, so I see us having a base on Mars in the future, but not really a big colony with population. I mean, we can discuss that. I think we should instead focus on getting to other stars, maybe nearby stars where there might be Earth-like planets around them. The galaxy has many stars, many planets, 100 billion or so in our galaxy, okay, and there are, as far as we can tell, about 100 billion galaxies as well beyond. So, of course, this is not anytime soon, but to me, there's a big universe to explore, and Mars is just the first small step, okay? So, next summer, I'll be going back to Devon Island, in fact, this summer, with my dog. We're going to do more ATV spacesuit tests to try to make the spacesuit as light as possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lee. I'm very sorry we have to cut off questions. If you have questions for Dr. Lee, you can follow him over to the signing table and ask your questions over there. We do need to clear the room. We have another program coming in, so thank you again for coming today, and we will see you later.